Now, one thing you mentioned was when the horror influence came in, because that's something myself personally I didn't really recognize until much later in my life. Like literally, probably not until 2003. I mean, you're talking about I'm almost 30 by that point, or I was 30, something along those lines. But I was always a fan of just what I call, the fantastic or le fantastique. Whether it was sci-fi or fantasy or horror, I always just thought they were all just kind of different facets, different ways of approaching the same thing. But it wasn't until 2003 when there was just kind of a proliferation of horror, when it really boomed into the market after the whole 9/11 and the Iraq War and everything started, where we had all this social distortion going on, where we were just inundated with horror films, that I realized, like, hey, I'm just going to go see all these horror films. But I was always a fan of them early on. I grew up in the era of Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street. It was really the golden age for slasher films, which is why I have such a predilection for them, because I always thought that horror films were basically slasher films and then a haunted house film. That was the full range of horror to me. It was either there's a guy with a knife or there's somebody dead in the house that's going to make the furniture move around. And I thought that's what horror was. It wasn't until I started going onto the IMDb horror board and talking to people all around the world in 2004 that I started to realize that there's a whole lot more to it than that. But growing up, though, horror films were always there. The only one that I was ever really able to watch was Jaws, because it would play on TV. Mm-hmm. And that was in the days when they just played the movie and they bleeped out the bad words, so you still saw all the crazy stuff. You still saw a lot of the gore and the violence and what have you. So Jaws, even to this day, is still one of the most terrifying movies ever for me. And it is just a terrifying movie to everyone, so it's a good one to go with.
They play that a lot. Like, I see it on every day on some channel.
But I bet they cut out the part like where Quint gets bitten in half. Probably. Sorry, spoiler there for all you Jaws versions. but if you haven't seen Jaws by now, then shame on you. I haven't you. But I remember vividly seeing where Quint gets bitten in half on TV and just being horrified by it as a child. Because this came out in what, 75? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm seeing it at 3, 4, 5 years old and just like, oh my God, look at this shark. And then to compound matters, to exasperate it, to make it worse, BJ and the Bear had an episode.
I knew you were going to get there.
They had an episode where somebody had they had the mechanical prop from the movie, from Jaws, and somebody let it loose in a pond, and it was going around eating people, and that was just terrifying.
Holy shit! I never knew about this.
Yeah, so as a kid, I'm thinking, there are real sharks in the ocean, but now every pond I see has a mechanical Jaws in it. So how much worse can things get?